Yeah, this was not surprising. We saw the buildup of the military in the Middle East. We knew this was coming. President Trump has been a man of his word as the President of the United States, and he has indicated to Iran on several occasions that they must drop all of their intentions for nuclear capabilities, and they must stop being a threat to the United States and come to the peace negotiating table. And they did not do that. They simply would not follow through with any of the things that we needed them to do to ensure that the safety and national security of the United States and its citizens remained intact.
And let's talk about the congressional role here moving forward. As a member of Congress, what will be Congress's role as we move ahead in the days, weeks, months to come?
We've talked about the War Powers Act before from 1973. It only requires the president to give 48 hours notice of an event like this, and he met that notice requirement. It doesn't require him to give prior notice, though he did with the Gang of Eight last week, and other of us members of Congress that are not in the Gang of Eight, we knew that this was coming. You could read the tea leaves. Though the hour and the date was not known to us, we knew that this was coming. But now, if it lasts more than 60 days, or in some cases 90 days, then Congress must act. And I take that responsibility very seriously. I don't expect that this would last that long. Certainly support the president in making sure that our citizens, our national security remains strong. And I support the president in what he's done in Iran, like I did with the attacks on the nuclear facilities earlier this year. But if it goes beyond 60 days, Congress needs to have a say in what and how and to what degree we continue.
And you mentioned reading the tea leaves. You, some other members of Congress were aware that this was going to happen. Was that through explicit notice or just understanding the situation and what was happening, big picture?
Well, from one standpoint, it's again, Mr. President Trump is a man of his word, and he has said repeatedly to Iran and publicly, and he did so in the State of the Union just last week, I'm not going to continue to say this. He said, I'm telling you, Iran, you have to come to the peace negotiating table, and if you don't, there will be a response by the United States. And in the meantime, we saw the military buildup. All of that certainly foretold the action that we saw this weekend, and it was not a surprise to us. Glad to see that we're working with the partners in the region, a number of Arab partners in the region now on our side, and certainly Israel on our side.
Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball, but when it comes to U.S. involvement in what's happening, how long could this go, do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to last more than 4 to 6 weeks. I really think that in that amount of time, what you're already seeing with the overwhelming strength of the military is going to continue to occur. Iran's made a miscalculation by sending missiles to other Arab nations in the region. I think that they intended for that to create pressure on the United States to end this action quickly, and that has not been the case. In fact, it's solidified our support and our partnership with the peace-loving Arab nations in the region who want to put pressure on Iran to come back to being a stable entity and a stable government, and not one that supports terror through Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, which is what they've done for years to harm Americans, to harm our allies, to put our national security interests at risk.
And when we talk about the role of Congress in this, there has been some criticism from some of your colleagues, especially on the other side of the aisle, about how this was done and Congress's role or lack thereof. What do you think about this discussion about should the president have come to Congress and asked for permission to do what happened?
Well, it makes no sense for a president to, if he's going to strike in a moment when you need not to give the enemy a heads up. It makes no sense to come to Congress and to tell Congress what's going to happen beforehand. You can't do that. That's not what the War Powers Act even looks at being a possibility. It says, look, we're going to just mandate within 48 hours that you come to Congress and to give the heads up. And so what we're seeing here is a president actually doing it the right way. He is taking action. He's keeping the Gang of Eight informed about what's happening in an appropriate time frame, but then he is involving Congress on the backside. We've already had a briefing. I suspect we're going to have some more briefings. I know we're going to have some more briefings this week, and we're going to have a say in what happens long term if this ends up being more warlike. But on the short term, I applaud the president for taking strong action that I would have thought former presidents of both parties should have taken in years past.
And you mentioned that in the short term, that support. If this were to turn into something long term, more of a war with lengthy U.S. involvement, would that be something you would consider? What would you feel about that?
Yeah, we just have to take the facts as they come, as this rolls out. It's a rolling development. Certainly, Congress must play a part in those long-term decisions if there's going to be long-term military action, as contemplated by the War Powers Act of 1973. But until we get there, we need to show support. We need to make sure that the president knows that we have his back in this action as the commander-in-chief. He has inherent authority under Article 2 of the Constitution to take these actions, to make sure that our troops abroad, our citizens abroad, our citizens here are all protected from those that would do harm. And there's no question Iran intends to do harm to us. The Iranian government that's presently in place intends to do harm. Pre-1979, Iran looked very different. And post 1979, after the revolution, there was this lean towards terror, and we've seen that certainly since the current Shah has been in place. And we want to see that reversed. We want the Iranian people to determine their own future. We want them to be a stable country that is a partner in the region with the other Arab countries. But that cannot be the case when their main goal is the destruction of Israel or the destruction of America and the buildup of missiles and nuclear programs that are intended to do that.
And I want to speak domestically when it comes to this conversation happening right now about funding for Department of Homeland Security. Where do things stand on that right now, and where do you stand on that?
I suspect that this week you're going to see another vote on the DHS appropriations bill. It's the one of 12 bills that's still out there that hasn't been passed. It's because the Democrats are playing political games with this. They're using the political moment of the day to try to force the president to take action that is not in the best interest of the United States. But now in this moment when the homeland security of our nation is even more important, hour by hour, I posted this on social media, hour by hour we see the greater importance of this. We call on the Democrats to come back to the table and say, okay, we're going to pass the appropriations bill that they had agreed on, that Republicans and Democrats both had already negotiated and agreed on before we had some domestic incidents that sent the Democrats to their corner to say, no, we're not going to agree to it. Well, we actually need Homeland Security in this moment because we don't know, with the thousands and the tens of thousands of people that have come across our border during the Biden administration, many of whom are from the Middle East. We don't know if we have sleeper cells, and we don't want people to be fearful, but we certainly want people to be cautious, and we need to be ready. And that means passing appropriations for Department of Homeland Security. I anticipate we're going to pass that again this week on the House floor. Republicans send it back to the Senate, see what the Democrats do with it, but I'm certainly in favor of passing those appropriations immediately.
And in that vein, talking about violence here domestically, a tragic attack at a bar over the weekend in Austin. Your thoughts about that and what we learned about the suspect?
Yeah, it's unfortunate to see and just heartbreaking to see what happened in Austin over the weekend. And this is another reason why we need the Homeland Security appropriations done, because we don't know what may come next. We don't know what Iranian cells or other terrorist affiliated cells in the United States, and we're certain that there are some, what they're planning, what they have determined to do, and we need to be ready to repel that. Our hearts are broken for the families in the Austin tragedy. And this this man that committed this crime, by all initial accounts, certainly was driven by a religious fervor that was in the wrong direction, not a founded fervor, but really one of terror and one to do harm to those that would not follow it in the religion that he had.
And Congressman, what are we missing here? What else is going on in Washington or here in the district that you want people to know about?
Well, we've got lots going on in Washington, D.C. that we continue to promote the agenda that the American people asked us to do in the last election. We've passed some great bills here in the last couple of weeks. We need the Senate to move on, one of which is the Save America Act. It's very critical to make sure that we remain easy location to vote, but hard to cheat. And that means you got to show your ID, you got to prove who you are as a citizen on the front end when you register, and then you got to show your identification when you actually go to vote. That Save America Act is easy. It polls at like 85 or 90%, even on the Democratic side, polls at 70% favorable towards that issue. I want the Senate to get their job done. We've passed now 3 versions of it in the House over the past year, and the Senate simply is not moving that the way they should. They need to get it to the president's desk to get that signed. That's number one. But we passed some other great bills. We passed a SPEED Act by Bruce Westerman in the past month, which is a regulatory reform act that will make growth much more possible in the United States by rolling back tons of these regulations. We've codified almost 100 of President Trump's executive orders in the past year or so, and we have also rolled back a number of Biden's regulations through congressional review acts in the past year as well. So we are doing a lot of great work in Congress, and a lot of it's getting to the president's desk, but more of it needs to. Got a great bill by French Hill that we passed a couple weeks ago that will make housing more affordable, called the 21st Century Act. And that bill would again reduce regulatory burden on banks and housing so that we can actually have smaller and regional banks have the greater capacity to loan out. They're the ones loaning for people that are buying houses, and we'll have a lower cost of the burden to build a house because the environmental regulations will be less. So those are the kinds of things that we are passing, that we are doing. We got more of that to come, but I think in the next couple of weeks you're going to see a real focus just on making sure that we get appropriations done for DHS, and we actually get we get support for the president in what he's doing in Iran.